So welcome, Umesh as well, Vincent. Hello, everybody. Ian. All right. So my name is Sin for those who don't know me. So I'm going to introduce the speaker of today's session, Sister Paññasiri. First of all, I would like to pay respect to the triple gems, the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, Aboriginal elders, past, present, and emerging. And where I am at the moment is the Wadu Medical Country. So welcome. And today we are fortunate to have our speaker, Sister Paññasiri, and a little bit about Sister. Sister Paññasiri is currently located in Sri Lanka. She's from the Sutta Meditation Series YouTube channel. The Sutta Meditation Series YouTube channel gives information on how to study the Buddha's teachings, or Dhamma-Vinaya, and meditate on the Buddha's insight pathways contained in the Theravada suttas. Particular emphasis is given to lay practice towards developing the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, attaining path and fruit, and culminating in the realization of full liberation, or nibbāna. They are a group of kalyāṇamittas, or spiritual friends, who develop and practice in accordance with the Dhamma-Vinaya, or the Buddhist teaching. Their Sangha is globally situated with strong grassroots in Sri Lanka. So tonight's topic is the mastery of the Buddha's instructions. And to my understanding, based on the summary that a sister gave me, this is going to be based on the Pali Canon, and it's going to cover the essential teachings of the Buddha that will help us on our spiritual path today. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Sister Paññasiri, who's going to lead meditation first, and then Sister will give a Dharma talk. Okay, over to you, Sister.
Blessings of the Triple Gem. Hello to everyone. Thank you to Sister Tina, Brother Zen, Brother Sin, those of you who I've actually briefly interacted with, and the rest of the team at Metta Center for your invitation to come and share Dhamma today. Much merit to all of you. I come as a friend in Dhamma, and as I said earlier, I know you do an immense amount of giving at Metta Center, which includes bringing people together to grow and develop in the Buddhist teachings and helping in a multitude of ways. So anumodana. And I hope you continue to flourish and grow as a community, bringing more goodness to the world. So would it be okay if I shared my screen now?
Please.
Hold on a second. It's been disabled, so
Could you try now?
someone...
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Oh, yes. Thank you. Okay, so the title of today's Dhamma session is The Mastery of Buddha's Instructions. And those who are familiar with Sutta Meditation Series, our YouTube channel or podcast, will know that I often start with tips and reminders about how to get the best out of the session. So basically, we've already paid respects to the Triple Gem. So I'd like to start with those tips and reminders. So the first thing I wanted to say was, this is because it helps us to be able to use a different approach to Buddha's teachings. And it's a way for all of us to kind of prepare our mind to make it malleable, as the Buddha would often say, pliable towards his teachings. So the first one is keep an open mind. Like, we can often come to Dhamma with preconceptions, very strong opinions of Buddha Dhamma. And that's myself included. So the first one is really about giving ourselves the opportunity to hear the Buddha's teachings fresh, not coming from, say, for example, a fault-finding mind, but rather a chance to hear a different perspective, maybe try something the way the Buddha might have intended, and to be open to having areas in our understanding or our practice of the Dhamma where we can develop and grow. The second is being okay with not understanding everything. Our conditioning at school is, and very much in the world as well, is very strong when it comes to thinking that we have to understand everything right off the bat. But in Dhamma, it can take a little while for things to simmer and also for us to connect with it. And so the Buddha does say that it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So be okay with whatever resonates in this session. It could be just one moment, it could be one thing, it could be one word, it could be one particular sutta, or even one insight, so a glimpse into nibbāna. And remember that we're all learners, that we come together as friends in Dhamma to learn and make effort to penetrate the Buddha's teaching. It's a wonderful opportunity to lean on each other, which I know you do every week and at different sessions. And so we're leaning on each other's goodness, our collective effort, and our collective noble aspiration. So we're in this together, and there's joy in encouraging each other. And then apply yourself to the meditation. So in this session, I'll give a shorter guided meditation on loving kindness. We'll follow the Kalyāṇamitta Sutta. And this method is an example of mastering the Buddha's instructions and activating the Noble Eightfold Path. For some of you, it might be a little different from what you're used to, but if you can, well, just try and lean into it. And so we're going to be cleaning the mind, calming it, concentrating it, and then uplifting it with wisdom. And that's how we're going to develop and spread loving kindness. So right now, just do a quick check of your mind. What is it like right now? Is it heavy? Is it sad? Is it tired? Is it joyful? Is it angry? Just register it. Don't judge it, just register it. And then at the end of the session, do another check and see if it's changed for the better. And then the second to last one is use your own example. So it's very important when we meditate, when we develop the mind, to connect with the Dhamma. And so an effective way of doing that is to apply our own examples. The Buddha would say, when we see the Dhamma, we see the Buddha. And then when we see the Buddha, we see the Dhamma. So this is the way that we do that. And then lastly, have good wishes for everyone who's joining today. And most of all, have good wishes for everyone that has helped us right up until this point. Okay, let's now get ready for our meditation. Find a suitable posture that is comfortable, one that is supportive of an upright mind. And this is going to be quite an active meditation. So again, just lean into it. So if we have any unskilled states, it blocks us from being able to develop immeasurable loving kindness. So let's begin by making a wholesome intention to purify our physical, verbal, and mental actions in order to develop supramundane loving kindness. Buddha said we must be upright. So we need to check our physical and verbal actions. So first thing we need to check is, have we killed any living beings? Do we destroy life? So this could be hunting, killing animals in the wild, even squashing a cockroach. Think of your own example. It can be recent or it can be in the very, very past. See that it blocks loving kindness. And for this meditation, give up killing living beings. We do not approve of it. Now we look at, do we take what is not being given? Have we stolen other people's wealth or property? So we ask, would we like it if somebody stole from us? So when we're younger, maybe we took something from our parents' wallet without permission. Or maybe we have misused company assets at work. Think of your own example. See how stealing blocks loving kindness. And give up stealing. Don't approve of stealing. Now we look at, have we had any sexual misconduct? This includes cheating, sexual violence, anything non-consensual or illegal. Would we like this happening to us? So think of your own example, cheating in a past or current relationship, doing something wrongful. See how it blocks loving kindness. And give up sexual misconduct. We don't approve of it. Now we ask, do we have false speech? Have we lied to gain something? Would we like it if someone was lying to us? Example could be lying to our parents when we were younger, or maybe lying at work to cover something up or to gain something. Again, think of your own example and see that it blocks loving kindness. Let's give up lying. We don't approve of it. Now we ask, have we had divisive speech? Through our speech, have we created division between people or groups? Would we like it if someone was doing that to us? An example could be splitting up a friend from another friend or creating disharmony within the family. Think of your own example, see that it blocks loving kindness, and let's give up divisive speech. We don't approve of it. Now we ask, have we had harsh speech? Have we spoken rough words, harsh words, hurt someone with our words? Would we like someone speaking to us like that? So this could be yelling and screaming in the family or verbally abusive to someone on the road. Think of your own example. See that it blocks loving kindness. And let's give up harsh speech. We don't approve of it. Now we ask, have we had frivolous speech? Have we gossiped or repeated words that are unbeneficial? And would we like that directed at us? We could be gossiping about family members or friends, or unbeneficial talk when someone's trying to get something done. Again, think of your own example. Let's give up frivolous speech. Let's not approve of it because it blocks loving kindness. Now we are upright. Take a moment to acknowledge the purity of the mind. Buddha said we must be thoroughly upright. To develop loving kindness, we can't afford to backslide, to go back to any kind of physical or verbal misconduct. So together, let's make a strong determination to maintain our virtue for this meditation so we can develop loving kindness. The Buddha then said, we need to be easy to instruct. So if we have unskilled mental states, those will block loving kindness. So we need to check and remove them. The first one is derogation. Out of anger, do we belittle others? Do we remove people's good qualities? Examples could be belittling a colleague, thinking they don't deserve that praise or promotion, or calling someone a name, like a pig. That removes their human quality. Think of your own example. If you have derogated, how it blocks loving kindness. And give up derogation. Don't approve of it. Envy is another block to loving kindness. Are we jealous of others? Do we think he or she has, I don't? He or she can, I can't. We could envy someone's lifestyle or envy someone at work. Think of your own example and see how it blocks loving kindness. Let's give up envy, not approve of it. Now we come to disparaging. Do we divide or split people in our mind based on our preferences or because we have a grudge? Examples could be wanting to split up certain friends, only working with people that we like, that we don't have a grudge with. Again, think of your own example and see that it blocks loving kindness, and let's give up disparaging. We don't approve of it. And then there's stinginess. Have we been stingy or selfish with our wealth or property? Stingy with our knowledge? Stingy with our families or groups, excluding others? Examples could be not sharing knowledge with colleagues at work, or only offering things to people that we like and excluding those we dislike. Again, think of your own example, see that it blocks loving kindness, and let's give up stinginess. Let's not approve of it. Now we are easy to instruct. The Buddha said that we also need to be gentle. Gentleness is connected with being polite, physically and verbally polite. If we're rude, how can we be gentle? So let's check, have we been physically rude or harsh? Do we push others, shove others, slam doors, jump the queue, be rude on the road? Or are we verbally rude? Do we shout? Do we scream? Do we use rude language, make rude sounds, interrupt others? If we have any of these things, it blocks loving kindness. So for this meditation, if you have any of these, let them go. Let's not approve of that kind of behavior. And the Buddha said that we needed to be humble, not arrogant. If we are arrogant, we think we are better than other people, and so this blocks metta, loving kindness. Are we arrogant about our appearance, our health, our youth, maybe our education, our career, our wealth, maybe our children, our achievements? And think, how can we spread loving kindness, wishing others to be happy and well, if we're arrogant or lord over other people? We need to remember, if we're born, we're all subject to aging, sickness, and death. No one and nothing is exempt from that. So what is there to be arrogant about? We are all brothers and sisters in the same predicament. We're all in the same boat. So for this meditation, let's give up arrogance. We do not approve of it. Buddha says that we need to be controlled in the sense faculties. If we're uncontrolled with our sense faculties, it blocks loving kindness. When we run with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, when we let our senses run amok, what happens? We start to want things, covet things, and then our mind gets polluted. So all the things that we just cleaned up, they start to come back to the mind. So for this meditation, let's give up letting our senses run amok. Let's keep our sense faculties calm. The Buddha said someone who is controlled in the sense faculties is prudent, is wise. So up to this point in our meditation, with some wisdom, we've seen the truth of our collective predicament, how we are all brothers and sisters in birth, old age, sickness, and death. Now that we've purified the mind to this extent, let's spread loving kindness to all living beings. That means every single living being in all realms of existence who share our collective predicament. Let's wish, may all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings realize the true safety, the supreme happiness that is lasting. Let's do this for a few minutes. Think of the noble beings who also spread immeasurable loving kindness to all beings and uplift the mind in all directions. If the mind comes to a natural still point, allow it to abide in loving kindness. Things of the Triple Gem, we can come out of our meditation. So as we said, today's session is on the mastery of the Buddha's instructions, so Anusasani Patihariyang in Pali. And the meditation we just did is the first part of the Kalyāṇamitta Sutta. It's an example of experiencing the mastery of Buddha's instructions. And there are many sutta meditations that exemplify that. In this session, we're going to use the Buddha's gradual instructions to lay people, so Anupubbinkaṭa in Pali. And that will be our case study to shine the light on the mastery of the Buddha's instructions. Only a Samma Sambuddha can teach in this way. So on this slide, you'll see that in the Theravada Sutta, this is Digha Nikāya, the Buddha distinguished between three kinds of mastery. He declared them, having realized them for himself with his own insight. So the mastery of psychic power, the mastery of telepathy, and the mastery of instruction. Sometimes the word that they use is also miracle. And at the time of the Buddha, and even now, most people would go for the first one or two as being the superior. However, the Buddha praised the mastery of instruction over the other two because it leads to the noble attainment, so path and fruit, as well as it culminates in complete liberation. So in other words, the Buddha's instructions, it helps us to develop the Noble Eightfold Path, the way leading out of suffering, whilst the other two don't. They may help us in this lifetime, for example. So if we can recognize the Buddha's method of instruction, see the real value, unlock his code, extract insight or wisdom pathways, then it can be really, really beneficial and fruitful. So even when it comes to teaching or sharing Dhamma, the Buddha emphasized the importance of instruction. So in this Uddaya Sutta, the Buddha said to Venerable Ananda, it isn't easy, Ananda, to teach the Dhamma to others. One who teaches the Dhamma to others should first set up 5 qualities internally. And so what we can see is that the first two are very much about instruction. The first is, I will speak, giving a gradual instruction. The second one is, I will speak as one seeing the method of the instruction, and that's Buddha's instruction. And of course, we speak out of compassion. We don't do it for material gain, and also without harming oneself or others. So let's now take a closer look at what the Buddha means by his gradual instructions, this Anupubbinkaṭa. And he would often teach this to lay people to get a better understanding of the mastery of his instructions. It's very useful to take a case study. So in this case, we're looking at the account of a leper called Suppabuddha. And it's from this Suppabuddha Kuti Sutta in Udana. And so the Blessed One said, the Blessed One saw the leper Suppabuddha sat in that assembly, and having seen him, this occurred to him. This one here is able to understand the Dhamma. And having regard to the leper Suppabuddha, he gave a gradual instruction. That is, a talk on giving, talk on virtuous behavior, talk on heavenly realms. He revealed the danger, degradation, and defilement of sensual pleasures and the blessing of renunciation. When the Blessed One knew that the leper Suppabuddha's mind was pliant, softened, rid of hindrances, uplifted, and confident, he revealed that Dhamma teaching special to the Buddhas, suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path. Then, just as a clean cloth rid of dark spots would readily absorb dye, so too, when the leper Suppabuddha sat in the same seat, the dust-free, stainless Dhamma eye arose. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. Then the leper Suppabuddha, having seen the Dhamma, attained the Dhamma, understood the Dhamma, fathomed the Dhamma, crossed over doubt, got rid of bewilderment, attained self-confidence, and became independent of others in the teaching of the teacher. So we see here that the Buddha has given this gradual instruction, and it resulted in the leper's mind being uplifted, pliant, free of hindrances. And so he was ready to receive the next level of teaching, which was the Four Noble Truths. And we get confirmation right at the very end that he realized noble attainment. And in this case, Suppabuddha, he attained the first stage of enlightenment, so the fruit of stream entry. So there are other examples of lay people who received the Buddha's gradual instructions. So it was not a one-off occurrence. There were numerous other lay people who received exactly the same method or sequence of instruction from the Buddha, and they all realized one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. So let's go through these examples. So there's General Siha. He was a Lichavi general of Vesali, and he was a famous patron and follower of the Nigampas. And despite him being obstructed from visiting the Buddha, he met the Buddha, received the same method of instruction, and he entered the stream. Then we have Uga of Vesali. When he first encountered the Buddha went through the same method of instruction, and at that point he also entered the stream. And then later he realized the fruit of non-return. And if we know from the suttas, he became the foremost of the Buddha's lay followers, declared as those who give and are agreeable. So he's a real role model for us. In terms of Uga of Hatigama, he had been celebrating, getting drunk at the time when he encountered the Buddha. He felt great shame upon seeing the Buddha, and his intoxication or drunkenness immediately vanished. And so he went to pay respects to the Buddha, and the Buddha followed the same method of instruction, and he realized the fruit of non-return. So he's declared as the foremost of the Buddha's male lay followers for being attendants to the Sangha. And then we have Upali. He was a very distinguished householder who lived in Nalanda. And again, he was the follower of the Nigampas. And so he went to refute the Buddha's teaching. And this was despite warnings from others. And during the course of his discussion with the Buddha, he comes to agreement with what the Buddha is saying. And he takes refuge in the Triple Gem. And then the Buddha gave him the same method of instruction, and Upali entered the stream. And then we have Anathapindika, one of the most famous of the Buddha's lay followers. He was a banker from Savatthi, and most of us will know that he had unparalleled generosity to the Buddha and the Sangha. So when he encountered the Buddha, it was during the Buddha's first year of enlightenment, and they encountered each other in Rajagaha. So on that first morning of meeting him, the Buddha gave him the same method of instruction, and Anathapindika entered the stream. And of course, Buddha would later declare Anathapindika as the foremost of his male lay followers, who's a donor. And this one I find quite interesting. There are 31 assassins that Devadatta sent to kill the Buddha. So this is assassins that were under the command of Prince Ajatasattu. And of course, we know that Devadatta was extremely jealous of the Buddha and went to great lengths to do quite unwholesome things. The interesting thing is that none of the 31 assassins succeeded, because when they encountered the Buddha, they ended up feeling remorse and they admitted their mistake and asked for forgiveness, and the Buddha gave them the same method of instruction, and that's how 31 assassins all entered the stream. Then we have Yasa, his family and 4 friends. Yasa was the son of a wealthy merchant who was brought up in great luxury and comfort. He woke up one morning and he had a remarkable insight about the downside of sensual existence. And so he went to look for the Buddha. Buddha gave him the same method of instruction, and he entered the stream. While he was there, his father came looking for him. Buddha did the same thing. His father also entered the stream. And while Yasa's father was receiving instruction, Yasa penetrated the Dhamma deeper, and he attained the fruit of arahantship right then and there as a layperson. And then he requested the going forth, and he ordained into the Sangha. The following morning, Yasa's mother and also his ex-wife approached the Buddha. They too received the teaching, same method of instruction, and they too entered the stream. Later on, Yasa's 4 friends came to visit, also received the same instruction from the Buddha, and they too entered the stream. They requested to go forth, and in due course, they attained fruit of arahantship. And then we have 80,000 village chiefs. So they were sent to King Bimbisara to receive instruction on the afterlife, to go and see the Buddha about that. And they went to find the Buddha, and he offered the same method of instruction, and all 80,000 village chiefs entered the stream. And then the last one is Bilata Karchana. He was a sugar dealer who encountered the Buddha and the Sangha while traveling, and he was fortunate to receive the same instruction from the Buddha and also entered the stream. So these stories about lay people and their fruitful encounters with the Buddha, they provide a very compelling and powerful case for the mastery of the Buddha's instructions. And the obvious question that we wish to ask is, why and how did these lay people realize noble attainment? And the answer lies certainly in the mastery of the Buddha's instructions, but also in what underpins his method of instruction. And that doesn't just apply to what we're examining today about these gradual instructions of the Buddha. It's also how he taught Brahmins, kings, monastic Sangha, and also divine beings. Throughout his teachings, the Buddha had a code. And it's possible for us to unlock that code to extract insight pathways that will bear great fruit when developed to fulfillment. So in the Mahachattarithika Sutta, the Buddha gave a very comprehensive teaching on the Noble Eightfold Path. In that teaching, he taught that right view comes first. The Buddha said, we've got to understand wrong view is wrong view and right view is right view. And with right view, there's twofold. There's mundane right view and there's supramundane right view. And understanding this distinction becomes our right view. So on this slide, we have the Buddha's explanation. What is wrong view? Here, a person has the view. There is nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed, no fruit or result of good and bad actions, no this world, no other world, no mother, no father, no beings who are reborn spontaneously, no good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in the world who have realized for themselves by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. So that's wrong view. Then what is right view? Well, it's right view that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, ripening in the acquisitions. That's what the sutta says, which means one makes merit and that conduces to a good rebirth, but one hasn't made a significant shift, so is still bound to the whole mass of suffering. So here a person has the view that there is meaning in giving, sacrifice and offerings. There are fruits and results of good and bad deeds. There is an afterlife. There are such things as mother and father and beings that are reborn spontaneously. And there are ascetics and Brahmins who are rightly comported and rightly practiced and who describe the afterlife after realizing it with their own insight. So this is the right view accompanied by defilements and has the attributes of good deeds and ripens in attachment. So there's still craving there. And then what is supramundane right view? So that's the right view that Buddha describes that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. Meaning one has directly penetrated the Four Noble Truths, attained to the Noble Path, so realized one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. So here a person has a view. It's the wisdom, the faculty of wisdom, the power of wisdom, the awakening factor of investigation of principles or Dhamma. And right view is a factor of the path. In one of noble mind and undefiled mind, who possesses the noble path and develops the noble path, this is called right view that is noble, undefiled, transcendent, a factor of the path. So in this session, we don't have enough time to deep dive into all of that, but what we can take from this in our session today is what the Buddha was able to do through his gradual instructions, like what we went through just now and read out with the leper Super Buddha and all these other lay people, and how he gave that, and then he was able to give them a teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So in very simple terms, when a lay person who could be a farmer, a leper, a banker, an army general, a mother, whoever, when they met the Buddha, in the first instance, when he gave the gradual instruction, so talk on giving, virtuous behavior, heavenly realms, and so on, the Buddha helped the person to shift from wrong view to mundane right view. Once their mind was pliant, soft, free of hindrances, purified, confident with mundane right view, then, and then only then, he gave the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So then that enabled them to shift from mundane right view to supramundane right view. So by penetrating the Buddha's teaching, they were able to realize noble attainment. So what we can clearly see from this is that the Buddha encourages lay people to go all the way in terms of penetrating noble Dhamma, not simply to practice for happiness in this life or for a good rebirth, all good things. And as added evidence, there are also teachings to lay people in the Pali Canon where the Buddha gave insight pathways for noble attainment, but also for complete liberation. One example is the Potaliya Sutta. So most of us come to the Buddha's teachings or simply come to meditation without seeing or understanding what's really behind the mastery of the Buddha's instructions. Because we haven't seen it, we don't value it for what it is, what it really is. And if this is the case, then often we're trying to develop the mind without that solid foundational basis needed to penetrate noble Dhamma. Now we're 2,500 years and more after parinibbāna of the Buddha, what we can observe is that many people continue to develop the wrong path and practice, as well as many are taking the harder or the longer path because they haven't seen the mastery of the Buddha's instructions. And this is often through no fault of their own, it's because they haven't been shown. So if we were to look at these gradual instructions that lead to the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, we can see there's an insight pathway here. And it's important to note that the Buddha doesn't start teaching us with a teaching on the Four Noble Truths, meaning he doesn't start with the supramundane right view. Out of compassion, the Buddha recognized lay people need to be taught step by step, progressively, so the leap is not insurmountable and also not confusing. And to briefly summarize, he begins with a talk on giving, so dana kata. By doing so, he confirms that there is meaning in giving, in sacrifice, in offering. So it includes giving material things, giving freedom from danger, giving Dhamma. The Buddha would explain that there's great sacrifice and a real gift from our parents who have given us this opportunity to be born into the world and to acknowledge that debt that we owe them. And through the talk on giving, the Buddha would correct the wrong view that there's no karmic result or merit from giving, sacrificing, or offering. So Buddha would often encourage lay people to recollect their own generosity, and this is because it activates the non-greed path. If we're able to give, it means we're able to give up something that we would have had for ourselves, meaning we're able to give up some amount of craving. We also know from the teachings, such as the Tapati Sutta, that when we give or we're generous, that's one of the factors of stream entry. And then the Buddha would give a talk on virtuous behavior, so sila kata. The wrong view would say, oh, there's no fruit or result of good and bad actions. And the Buddha would confirm through his Buddha knowledge that there are fruits and results of good and bad deeds, that it's important to develop virtue. And this includes an understanding that there are beings who are reborn spontaneously into other realms. Could be to the hell realms or to the heavenly realms. And so these are the things that Buddha could conceive. Things that we don't conceive are the results of karma, but he does. And so he has known and seen and understood for himself. The Buddha would often encourage lay people to recollect their own virtue, their virtuous behavior, and this is because it activates the non-hate path. And like generosity, we know from teachings in the chapter on stream entry in the Samyutta Nikaya that virtuous behavior is a factor of stream entry. Then the Buddha would talk about heavenly realm, Saggakata. The Buddha would confirm that after death, what happens with the breakup of the body is that we transmigrate. There's rebirth to another existence, depending on one's good or bad deeds, one's karma. So if one practices good conduct by body, speech, and mind, doesn't revile the noble ones, has right view, and performs good deed because of right view, it can conduce to rebirth after death in a heavenly realm. And so we have examples, even Anathapindika, we see in the suttas, he was reborn soon after death to the Tusita Deva realm. And Hathaka of Alavi, another eminent lay disciple, was spontaneously reborn after death to a viha, one of the pure abodes. He was a non-returner. So this overcomes the wrong view that there is no world, no this world, no other world. And the Buddha often encouraged lay people to recollect divine beings or devas, that if we practice, then we can have the same kind of conviction, virtuous behavior, learning, generosity, and wisdom as those divine beings. And so that activates the non-greed path, the non-hatred path, the non-delusion path. Then the Buddha would give a talk on revealing the danger, degradation, defilement of sensual pleasures. Kāmanang, adinavang, or kārang, sankilesang. The Buddha would have taught that a person who indulges in sensual pleasures and performs bad deeds would be someone who continues to follow a worldly path, a path bound to rebirth and suffering. So he would encourage, develop right view, see the danger, degradation and defilement of sensual pleasures, so that one won't indulge in sensual pleasures and perform bad deeds. And as a result, one would come to the spiritual path. And then lastly, the Buddha would talk on the blessing of renunciation, nekame anisansa. The Buddha would correct the wrong view that there are no good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in the world who have realized by direct insight and can declare this world and that, the other world. And so he would probably use himself and the other Sangha as examples that they are ascetics and Brahmins who are rightly comported, who rightly practice. They renunciate sensual pleasures and the worldly path. And they're the ones who describe the afterlife after realizing it with their own insight. So they have the knowledge of past lives and also of what happens to beings arising and passing away. And so then he would elaborate on the benefit or the blessing of renunciation. So it's at this point that the mind of the person receiving that gradual instruction, their mind would be ready, pliable, and soft, free of hindrances, and they would have shifted away from wrong view to mundane right view. So knowing and seeing that the person is ready, the Buddha would then give a teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So as we know, there are insight pathways here, that there is suffering. There's the origin of suffering, which is craving. And together, those first two noble truths, they sum up the arising phenomena. And then there's the third noble truth, which is there is the cessation of suffering. And the Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth, which leads to the cessation of suffering. So together, these last two noble truths, they sum up the passing away phenomena. So when one penetrates the Four Noble Truths, the knowledge of arising and passing away, one can attain to the Noble Path. So as part of that teaching, the Buddha would have revealed that we have been transmigrating samsara with no discoverable beginning for countless lifetimes by following the wrong path, rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. And that birth to the human realm and heavenly realms is rare. And because of this, the Buddha would have encouraged to train, to develop insight into the Four Noble Truths, that suffering, dukkha, is to be fully understood. Craving, tanha, is to be abandoned. Cessation of suffering, or dukkha nirodha, is to be realized. And the Noble Eightfold Path, Arya Tangika Magga, is to be developed. So as part of this, Buddha would have emphasized that we need to understand and penetrate the big picture about our own arising and passing away, how it is suffering to be reborn into any existence subject to aging, sickness, and death, and the whole mass of suffering, that we have to abandon any longing, any craving that will result in any rebirth. And realizing cessation of all suffering, what that means is the supreme safety and happiness of nibbāna. And the Noble Eightfold Path, rooted in non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, is what we must develop. The fruit of developing the Noble Eightfold Path is ultimately the complete liberation from suffering. However, as we penetrate the Dhamma, noble attainment is possible, such as what occurred with those lay people that we went through. Noble attainments such as, for example, realizing the fruit of stream entry. What that literally means is that one has cut off countless lifetimes of suffering down to a maximum of 7 lifetimes, and in some cases less. So this is how the later part of the Buddha's method of instruction on the Four Noble Truths would enable a person to shift from mundane right view to supramundane right view. So what emerges with supramundane right view, or right view that is noble, undefiled, and transcendent, is wisdom. If we take in the mastery of the Buddha's instructions, what we have delved into so far, we can ask ourselves, in our practice, are we activating the right things? Do we follow the Buddha's instructions? And can we see the benefit and fruit of doing so? Another thing we can connect here is this dialogue between the Buddha and Venerable Sariputta. This comes from the Duttiya Sariputta Sutta. And the Buddha asked, Sariputta, they speak of the stream. What is the stream? And then Venerable Sariputta says, Venerable Sir, the stream is this noble eightfold path. That is right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And then the Buddha asked Sariputta, Sariputta, they speak of a stream enterer. What is a stream enterer? And Venerable Sariputta says, Venerable Sir, one who possesses this noble eightfold path is called a stream enterer, the venerable of such and such name and clan. And so what the Buddha and Venerable Sariputta is making very clear is that a stream enterer is one who possesses the Noble Eightfold Path. The lay people we've spoken of during this session, when they receive the Buddha's method of instruction, so starting with gradual instructions to uplift their minds from wrong view to mundane right view, then a teaching on the Four Noble Truths to develop supramundane right view, they now all possess the Noble Eightfold Path. They've reached noble attainment, realized one of the stages of enlightenment. So given what we've delved in today, then it's good to revisit what is bhavana? What is meditation in the Buddha's teachings? And so we commonly use this translation of meditation, but bhavana also translates as development. So we can ask, development of what? And if we see the mastery of the Buddha's instructions and what is emphasized in the Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths, it's primarily the development of the Noble Eightfold Path. So when we meditate or develop, we must ensure we develop the Noble Eightfold Path. That is the encouragement from the Buddha. So as we have seen from our session today, this means establishing right view. With right view at the forefront, we develop right thought or intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness. And the fruit of this is right concentration. When we have noble right concentration, it leads to right knowledge and right liberation. In our loving kindness meditation today, by following the Buddha's instructions in the Kalyāṇamitta Sutta, we were activating the Noble Eightfold Path. We were developing right view by abandoning unskilled states and replacing them with skilled ones. And so when we develop this, we develop the right thought that we want to renunciate unskilled actions, that we want to have non-ill will, that we want to have non-cruelty. And so when that happens, we're able to maintain the right kind of speech, the right kind of action, the right kind of livelihood, and the rest of the path unfolds. So one of the things that often brings delight to the mind is the Buddha's words. So there's a saying from the Buddha from the Dhammapada verse, number 178. The Buddha uttered these words, rejoicing with Anathapindika at the time when his son Kala, who had been avoiding contact with the Buddha and the Sangha, and on that day he had realized the fruit of stream entry. And Anathapindika was lamenting a little bit because he had to bribe his son. He had to say, I'll give you this money if you go and spend time with the Buddha and the Sangha. And the first time it didn't quite work. And then the second time it worked because the Buddha had used some of his supernormal powers. And the Buddha uttered this verse because he was saying to Anathapindika, sole sovereignty over the earth, or going even to a heavenly place, or domination over the entire world. The fruit of stream entry is superior. And so I'd like to end the talk here with these words of encouragement. So we can open now for any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Sister Paññasiri, for a very comprehensive talk. It covers a lot of things, and also it was the way you summarized the talk at the end with the very clear images on the slide was very good. And so thank you so much for that, sister. And anybody else who has questions and comments, please feel free to put them in the chats and we can discuss them and ask sister to answer the questions. And if anybody would like to ask questions, for those people who are attending the session in person, if you'd like to ask questions, you can pass them on to Tina or Zen, who are there in person. Thank you. So, are there any questions? Anybody online or in person? Sister, I would like to ask you something related to right effort. You mentioned right effort as one of the components of Noble Eightfold Path there. Sometimes, especially, we listen to different teachers and then we try to practice by following the instructions from various teachers. We sometimes think what is meant by right effort and to what extent is right effort actually right? And, are we being too lenient with the practice? Are we being, too laid back? Are we being too serious? And how do we know that we're practicing the middle path sometimes? Because what is the middle path to one may not be middle path for others, because sometimes we like to think that we are practicing the middle path, which when in fact it's actually just something that suits our own comfort, which is probably not the same as what others might perceive. So what's your view on that? And if you'd like to elaborate on that, that'd be great, sister.
Yes, that's an interesting question. And that comes up a lot because right effort, just to answer it very simply to begin with, right effort is only directed properly by right view. So if you go to the Mahachattarīsika Sutta, the Buddha would say that three things work together: right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. So right view is the leader. It knows what is kusala, what is wholesome or skillful, and it knows what isn't. And so when that is firmly established, that leads. Now, when it comes to right effort, think of right effort like the worker. It's the one that goes and applies the effort to clean the mind if there's unskilled states or needs seclusion or some kind of thing to be done, and also to promote the good things that need to be done. Effort is also needed for that. So if you remember with right effort, it's we make sure we abandon what is unskillful. We don't allow it to develop if it hasn't arisen. And then on the good side, we actually develop what is wholesome as a practice, and we also protect what we've already developed so we don't backslide. So that's effort. The third thing being right mindfulness is the one that is like directing traffic. It says, okay, so this is where effort needs to be applied, but it also takes direction from right view. So when it comes to mundane things, yes, we all have different ways of practicing, but right effort that is really strong comes from how much right view you have. That is what is really true. So if one hasn't cultivated the right view, then of course, when it comes to effort, one would say, okay, it's okay, it doesn't matter. I'll just slack off a little bit. Or it might even have the wrong view that says there's no point of doing skillful things or abandoning unskillful ones. So it really depends. But what is very, very true is that if one has firmly established right view, and this needs to be constantly established, it's not there all the time. Like some people misapprehend and think, okay, I can go about my daily life and I'll always have right view. It may last for a little while after a meditation, but then when you interact with the world, it dissipates. And so when it comes to practice and making effort, one needs to come back to right view, establish it. Maybe it's only at the time of meditation that it's truly possible. And then you start to develop. You actually start to see how right effort kicks in, how right mindfulness is guiding that, checking in, patrolling, making sure. and then the army comes with the effort. When it comes to the pointy end of the practice, right effort, the Buddha talks about in terms of trainee guidelines or trainee modes of progress, ara the video, that becomes where you're really throwing the kitchen sink at the spiritual practice, that you don't shirk from that duty and you don't give up. And so with lay people, you need to train and build till you get to that point. So it's not appropriate if one has a busy lifestyle to think that, okay, I have to do it. So the middle path would be you do what you can within your conditions. And most of us are skillful enough to gauge what is right for us, that we make pragmatic decisions depending on what our conditions are. Like if we have a family, if we have, work deadlines, if there are certain things going on, but we might make a different decision when we're on retreat, when we've given ourselves a weekend for spiritual practice or an hour for spiritual practice, then it's different. Okay.
Thank you so much, sister. I can certainly relate to that, especially when you mentioned that sometimes after meditation, one can feel so good and it feels, oh yes, this is right, and then that kind of feeling can evaporate and sort of dissipate after a while. So when you mentioned that it's so important to go back to the right view again, and that's that I can really resonate. I can really relate to that. Thank you. There is a question, sister. This question is, thank you for the talk. Can anyone just meditate, or does there have to be certain important things to pay attention to, or should there be any preparation before meditation can take off? Yeah.
So when I started meditating, I tried everything. I went on the spiritual supermarket freeway, and that can have certain good things and bad things. And where I've come to very much for the last 20 to 25 years or more has been just coming straight back to the Buddha's teaching. And so, yes, it's possible for anyone to meditate. I mean, there's apps and all kinds of things. It really depends on what your motivation is and what your intention. So when it comes to the Buddha's teaching, say what I went through today, it's very much looking at what the Buddha's intent for giving his teachings was, which was to find freedom from all suffering. That's the ultimate thing. But that's not to say that there aren't other things out there that one can meditate on. And even what Buddha would say about meditating on the Noble Eightfold Path is that one has happiness in this lifetime and beyond that. So that is also possible. Now, when it comes to preparation before meditation, I mean, in terms of what I would always recommend is to find the love for the Buddha's teachings, to find delight in the Buddha's teachings, because you won't go wrong. When you pick up words of the Buddha, even just a few words, like even the last verses that we just read out, there's something when you penetrate it, you turn it in your mind, it makes the mind happy. Even when the Buddha advises to recollect one's own generosity, I love that because it's a way of saying, I can actually give up something. I can actually give up tanha, this craving. That's my proof. And even when you recollect one's virtuous behavior, it's the same thing. It's, oh, I can actually give up the wrongful types of things. Maybe it's not there all the time, but when I meditate, I can certainly do that. So when it comes to preparation, depending on what a person's motivation is, and I do understand that not everyone would have the same level of love for the Buddha as maybe I do, or maybe some have the same. But when that's the case, you've got to find peace in your meditation, calm in the meditation, but also it has to be something that is practical and something that is honest and true. Like one of the primary things about meditating on the Buddha's teaching is how much honesty it takes to meditate. Like you can't meditate well, I mean, you can, but you don't get the fruit of the meditation. But when you're so honest in the meditation, not to anybody else, but to yourself, there's so much joy that comes. And even when you meditate we are subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death. Yes, a lot of people say, oh, that's so morose. But when you really penetrate it, there's so much relief that comes from understanding it, understanding collectively, not just me and my aging, sickness, or death, or my loved ones, but everyone, all the insects, all the animals, all the people, everyone, all the things. So maybe I haven't fully answered the question, but preparation for meditation, lift the mind first. If it means making an offering, like a puja, if it means offering flowers to the shrine, if it means lighting some incense, if it means recollecting one's generosity, lift the mind first, and there's all good chances that your meditation will go well.
Thank you, sister. And it also goes to show how important it is for us to practice our sila, right? I think sometimes we, some people, myself included, have the tendency to, take a shortcut. For example, okay, let's go on meditation retreats and then practice meditation. Well, when sometimes, we neglect the importance of ethics. But then, as you mentioned earlier in the talk, the Buddha talked about how important it is to practice generosity, and then because it creates joy and uplifts the mind, and then after that one can be ready to understand the Four Noble Truths. And in the same way, if we practice ethics, then we generate joy in our mind, then maybe our meditation will also take off that way. Sister, there is another question here, or a comment rather, or question. The question is this: reflecting on a gradual process, what advice is there for people who feel dispassionate towards lay life and yet not ready to ordain, say, have one attachment holding them back? Yeah, for instance, someone who appreciates meditating for 5 to 7 hours a day and yet living a lay life find, of course, this is not financially sustainable, for instance. And I think on that note, I'm not sure whether you would like me to also combine the two questions together, but I think this is kind of related. So does sister have any advice for lay people in balancing earning a livelihood and spiritual practice? Maybe that's a separate one, but I thought maybe this could be related.
Okay, I'll address the first one first, and then you might need to remind me of the second one.
Okay.
So the first one about lay practice and not needing or wanting to ordain. I always encourage people to work with the conditions they have, not to overly challenge them, not to go towards an ideal, because it hurts us. And we have other people in our lives as well in different situations. So I've spoken to different people about this. One of the things is that it used to be that we would seek out ideal conditions. We have to go to a monastery, we have to go to the forest, we have to go to a really quiet place. Now, in Sri Lanka, that's not entirely possible in terms of really quiet places, whether it's in the forest or whether it's in a household. So I've often found that when one is a layperson, work with the conditions that you have. You don't need to make them perfect. If you have suitable conditions to meditate for long hours, that's amazing, because a lot of lay people don't have those conditions. And when you do have those conditions, use them wisely. And in terms of dispassion from the world, if you've developed your meditation to a point where you are genuinely dispassionate from the world, and that doesn't mean that you hate the world. Hating the world means that there's something wrong there. But if you are dispassionate from the world, like you're not that interested, you're not that interested in conversations about worldly things, you're not that interested in indulging, you see the danger, you want to actually develop and grow more, you find more happiness in the spiritual path, that's great. Now, one thing to balance is, yes, it's good to ordain, but it's extremely challenging to ordain in this time period. If you speak to a lot of monastics, it's not easy, the conditions now, some over 2,500 years after the Buddha, the world is encroaching on monasteries. And those what we think are idyllic conditions are not there. And at the same time, there are challenges on time. So if you're a layperson and you have a few hours to meditate in a monastery, it's not possible. There's so many demands of your time. There's also lots of other duties and things like that. So it's good to go and check it out for yourself. Like if you are inclined, go and check it out, go and stay there, go and see for yourself, go and see the challenges. And if you choose to ordain, that's wonderful. And if you don't, that's also fine. There are many, many lay people in the community that I'm associated with who prioritize spiritual practice, but still live in the world. They still have jobs, they still bring up families, and they meditate really well. And when we come together, whether it's via Zoom or whether it's in person, we encourage each other. We don't stress each other. We lean on each other in wholesome ways. And so I think a really good thing is to be able to meet your conditions where they are and tweak them and improve them. But don't expect perfect conditions, whether one is ordained or whether one is a layperson. So that's how I would answer the first part.
Thank you, sister. Yeah, and the second part is, does sister have any advice for lay people in balancing earning a livelihood and spiritual practice?
So the Buddha would say, and this is from Theravada Sutta and multiple suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, a layperson should earn a living. And so we see that in the examples of Anathapindika, who is very wealthy. We see it in other wealthy people in the suttas. And he would give guidelines about how to retain wealth. So if one is generous, one would earn a lot and retain wealth. That's the result of those good actions. So even when we teach kids, particularly in Sri Lanka, who are growing up with Dhamma schools and things like that, we would often say, if you want to be rich, then you would be generous. If you want to be influential, then you wouldn't have envy, things like that. So there are teachings that the Buddha gives about that and about how one shares that wealth with others, how one shares that within people that help you, with your family members, and those sorts of things. I think from a practical perspective, in terms of right livelihood, it's good to follow what the Buddha says, not to go into livelihood that is questionable, that is harmful to others. But in terms of being able to balance, I think there is no perfection there either, that we are always challenged with demands of working. And also, sometimes we are in conflict with how our companies or our managers and bosses are operating, that they don't have the same spiritual outlook as we do. But what I would say when it comes to that is to make sure you put the stop sign up and to keep to your ethics and principles, that it's just a job. We go there to do that. We need money. But at the end of the day, it's still just a job. And so you balance it by not craving or clinging too much to the job, but neither do you fling it away. And the same thing applies to family, to friends, to communities, to other services in the world. Okay.
Thank you so much for the advice. It's really helpful, sister. The next question is, if we accept our status as lay people and still continue to act upon our cravings to a lesser extent, aren't we just priming ourselves to be reborn? And it just feels like being a layperson almost conditions you to stay a layperson without attainment, since you're staying in that cycle where you don't go into the later stages because you're stuck doing things that lead to suffering. I'm not quite sure I understand this question fully, but perhaps
I'll have a go.
Right, okay.
I'll have a go. I think when it comes to misconceptions, what I find when I speak with lay people and groups of lay people of all different kinds, there's lots of misconceptions about lay Buddhist practice and also about what noble attainment and how quickly it can happen. So when we went through this session, you see that of course, one would say it's the Buddha, but at the same time, that even after the Buddha, some years after the Buddha had passed to parinibbāna, there were still teachings by the Arahants and things like that. And it's a pessimistic view to think that lay people cannot attain in this lifetime. Like, why would one practice if you had that kind of pessimistic view? My view has always been that it is possible if one has that noble aspiration, if someone adheres to the teachings, respects the teachings, sees the benefit of the teaching. So yes, it's true that when one works, I mean, each person knows themselves. When you work, you can go to work and you can really go towards the career, the money, the business, the wheeling and dealing, the lifestyle. I mean, it's quite obvious when one does that. But there's another way where you need to earn for your family. You need to earn for yourself. You need to earn even to do good in the world. You need to earn in order to have time. So that's very different from the first example of working for wheeling and dealing and personal pleasure and lifestyle and all those things. So there's a distinction there. And then when it comes to lay practice, what I've seen is that one can chip away with great benefit. That if you trust in, have confidence in the Buddha's teaching, in the Buddha, in the Buddha's teaching, in the Sangha that have practiced well, who are practicing well. You see examples in the teachings or in real life, then what happens is you start to see, oh, it is possible. You practice and then you see, oh, this thing has dropped away. It's not the same. So, for example, when I said before, if we're generous, we're able to give up something. So that would have been money that we would have spent on something for ourselves or a meal, a gadget, a dress, whatever that is. But when we give up that money, that means we're giving up some craving. That's a very important point that sometimes people miss. That's the non-greed path. That's the beginning of the non-greed path. If a layperson thinks, oh, but I don't have that and I'm still continuing to act a particular way, you need to check yourself. Sometimes we lie to ourselves. This is true. Sometimes we lie to ourselves and put ourselves down. That's derogation. We remove our good qualities. We do it to ourselves, we do it to others. So it's good to check ourselves. Is that true? And if it's not true, dispel it. And so at that point where you see generosity, you start to think, actually, I'm rubbing off some of the craving that I have. That money that I would have spent on a holiday, I put it towards a retreat, or I help my parents out or something like that. And so that's proof. That's genuine proof that as lay people, it's possible. Once you start going on the non-greed path, you start keeping precepts, and even if you can't keep the precepts all the time, in your meditation, like the cleaning we did in the kalyāṇamitta sutta, that's your proof that in meditation, because the mind is the leader, it's possible to be ethical right then and there. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about what happened yesterday or years ago. You cleaned it. So in the moment that you cleaned it, you have virtue. Okay.
Thank you, sister. And sometimes I also feel like, oh yeah, okay, I've done this wrong thing in the past, and then that thing which was not so noble or wholesome, and then we try to practice virtue, and these things can come up again in the past. But it's really liberating to know that we let go and then just focus on that virtue and that moment, and it's refreshing, and it gives us relief to think that way. Sister, someone said, "Thank you so much, sister. It is very beautifully explained, and I concur." Speaking of attainment, sister, there is another question. I'd like to add my own question to this because this is something that I'm curious about as well. So the question from someone who posted this is, I have heard Dhamma friends who have claimed or declared attainment to stream entry. yet there is a disconnect between the claim and their behavior. And how does one judge whether one or others have attained to the stream? So that's the question from the person that posted it in the chat. And my question in relation to that is, yes, I think, striving for that kind of attainment gives us purpose in our practice, and we can keep walking in that direction. However, when does it become an ambition? Because then the more we strive to get there, the less likely we are to actually get there, because then there's a lot of what do you call it? Like there's a lot of ambition involved instead of letting go. And also in my experience, I have been in the company of people who are practicing, but they talk so much about the attainment, like, okay, I've perhaps reached this jhana or that jhana, and how about you? And that kind of conversation can be quite intimidating and even patronizing for people who are probably new to the teaching, and that's not really helpful, I find. But at the same time, it is good to talk about this with spiritual friends. So how would you navigate that, sister?
So when we talk about noble attainment, I always think of it as noble aspiration. So I don't think of it in terms of ambition. Ambition is very much a worldly term, but noble aspiration makes it more in line with what the Buddha intended, which was the cutting off of suffering. So noble attainment for me always, in terms of the stages of enlightenment, all they simply mean to me is the literal cutting off of lifetimes of suffering. That's what it really means, that one has attained to the path with certain amount of wisdom to see that. Now, when people talk about noble attainments generally, it's probably good to be cautious about what you hear and talk about around people. It's like a sapling, our spiritual practice, a little sapling, a little seedling. It's really important not to compare and contrast. I mean, yes, we do certain things in order to learn, to check, but ultimately, such talk is, in a way, it can lead to mental rudeness, where sometimes people, knowingly or unknowingly, they declare certain things that they don't have. And so there's no loving kindness in that. And so it's not to judge other people for doing that, let them be. But I think from our own perspective, it's really good to be cautious around that. Now, by the same token, when it comes to, say, jhanas and to arupas and liberations, these are all good things to aspire to. Buddha gives very, very sequential teachings in order for lay people as well as monastics to attain them, to realize them. And the important thing about those things is that they are like a pass-through. You work on them, you realize them in order to see that it's not it. It's not nibbāna. There's still suffering in them. You go into these states of mind to see, so if I crave this, then this is what it's going to be like. And it is better when you go to jhanas, when you go to arupas, when you go to liberations. But the key thing that the Buddha would teach is that they're still constructed. So one would still be reborn, whether it's to a higher realm and then fall if one has no noble attainment, or to keep coming back again. So that's the point about being able to work through the Buddha's teaching in a methodical and sequential way. Buddha has this amazing way of showing, this is how you get there. This is what you need to look out for. This is what you're still holding on to. So abandon it. And so by chipping away, I find spiritual practice is a chipping away process of unskilled states in order to develop the skilled ones. And as you develop the skilled ones, you realize you have to give all of those ones up in order to find complete freedom from suffering. So that's how I would approach that if people are ambitious about noble attainment, that's one thing, but it's really still good to have noble aspiration. There's a sutta where the Buddha talks about we replace household happiness, household sadness, and even household equanimity with the renunciate happiness, renunciate sadness, renunciate equanimity. And the renunciate sadness is that aspiration, oh, I haven't attained yet. But that overcomes the unhappiness of I've lost money on the stock market, or I lost my job, or my child got sick, or something like that. It's a more wholesome one to have that noble aspiration to find footing on the path, the noble path. And so what was the second part that you were saying, Brother Sinsin?
Thank you, sister. Yes, the second part was like, I think when I use the word ambition, that's not necessarily exactly what I meant, but sometimes people can be enthusiastic about talking about these attainments, and of course it's understandable that people can talk about these kinds of things with enthusiasm, which is nice, especially within the circle of kalyāṇamittas or spiritual friends. But there is also, I see that there's a potential danger in that as well, because if another person joins in the conversation and they feel intimidated by this, perhaps this is not so good, because then they might think, oh, I haven't achieved anything, and these people have achieved something, and so it could be a bit tricky, I thought.
Yeah, it can be tricky. And I always think when it comes to spiritual practice, yes, we can talk with kalyāṇamittas, but at the same time, it's really good to focus on one's own practice. So even when we learn sutta meditations like Vatupama Sutta, Parinibbāna Sutta, we often clean our mind. And so what happens is we start to see these things in other people. And the practice is not to point the finger at other people. It's actually just to be able to improve oneself, to actually clean our minds and to walk the path. Now, when it comes to people who say that they have noble attainment, and then you see them act in a particular way. I think part of your question earlier was, how do we know that they have attained? It's actually very hard. The Buddha had a sutta where Venerable Sariputta did not recognize that one of the monks that he was teaching was an arahant already. And so the Buddha actually declared that, and Venerable Sariputta did not know. So if Venerable Sariputta cannot know, then how are we to know? Now, there are also suttas where the Buddha says you need to spend time living with the person, see them day in, day out for long time. Then you would get an idea. But then there are also suttas where, and one of them is Sunakata Sutta, where even someone with attainment, it's like they have a wound. So an arahant doesn't have a wound, but stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, they have wounds. And so when that wound is infected, as in when it makes contact with something in the world that triggers something, then the underlying tendency, so it could be the underlying tendency to anger, the underlying tendency towards sensual lust, it can kick in at that point, even though that they have noble attainment. So even though one might say, oh, those fetters are meant to be cut, but until one is an arahant, if you have that wound, as what the Buddha has taught in Sunakata Sutta, if you make contact maybe with a person or some kind of thing, and the wound starts to ooze, then that underlying tendency, that anusaya, can trigger. So at that point, you might think, oh, that person's not nobly attained, but one would be wrong. So there's different teachings that the Buddha gives. And so I think based on what I've seen, it's often good not to focus too much on people and to really focus back on what is happening with our practice. What is it that we can do to develop? Because what's really useful is to see one's own development, that when you realize, oh, this has fallen away just through spiritual practice. It hasn't fallen away because I've had to push it. So if one has a very strong yearning for, I don't know, watching violent movies, and then you do your spiritual practice and you still watch violent movies, and then one day you realize, oh, I don't want to watch that anymore. And that is the fruit of the practice. You don't force it. It's something that happens because right view has really taken hold, that the practice has really taken hold, and that there's beauty in that, there's grace in that.
Thank you, sister. And the focus on our own practice, it is so important. And I totally agree with this person who said comparison is Mara. I feel so. I can relate to that. Do we have time for just one last question, sister?
Yes, please go
Okay.
ahead.
Speaking of spiritual supermarket, okay, this person said, speaking of spiritual supermarket / highways, there is a lot of emphasis on technique, between quotation marks. Did the Buddha teach any techniques that were more conducive to awakening?
Interesting question. I would say that it's not necessarily techniques that the Buddha taught. If anything, even from the talk today, it's about extracting his code, extracting his insight pathways. What's really important is how we think when we meditate. Like, how are we thinking when we meditate? Techniques around other things are not so important. Like Buddha would give like different postures for meditation are possible. But if you really spend a lot of time with the Buddha's teaching, his words, you actually see that a lot of it has to do with how are you applying the mind? Because the mind is the leader. If the mind is corrected, then the speech, the action, the livelihood, those things get corrected. So what's really important about what the Buddha's approach is when you go through and you extract insight pathways, he's actually telling us how to think. And so even in the meditation we did at the start of our session, that is exactly what he's doing. He's saying, have these qualities, not those other ones. And if you develop your mind that way, you're closer, you're leaning towards nibbāna.
All right. Thank you, sister. Thank you so much for leading the session tonight. It's been really a real pleasure to have you, and we look forward to having you again in the future if you're available, sister. And before we finish the session, we would like to invite you to close the session by maybe doing some kind of dedication of merit or reflection, or say a few words as you wish, sister.
Anumodana. So we can first pay gratitude to the Buddha for these wonderful teachings. Let's also have gratitude for all the teachers and good friends who've helped us on this path. And we can share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem to all of you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your gentle presence and warmness of your question.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, sister. Before we say goodbye, I would like to invite Tina to probably make some announcements about upcoming events and other things that are related to what we do here at Metta Center.
Thank you so much, Sinsin, and thank you again, sister. What a beautiful presence that you have, and you're sharing. Clearly someone who has spent a lot of time with the words of the Buddha to be able to share in the way that you do and answer these questions for us. So thank you. So friends, we do have other events coming up. Every Monday we have free meditation classes, and that's at 6:30 to 7:30. And you can join in person as well as also online. Tuesdays, same time, same place. And also every Wednesdays we have different speakers who come, and you can join on in person as well as online. Next Wednesday we have Venerable Nyani Nanda, who is joining us from Malaysia, talking about the core teaching of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. So we invite you to come for that. We are also running a detox retreat, a Buddhist detox retreat in the Blue Mountains on the 5th to the 7th of July. We currently are completely booked out. We have 45 people registered and some people on our waiting list. However, if you want to join our waiting list, you can still register for that, because some people do at the last minute tend to say they can't attend. We are also organising a pilgrimage to Sri Lanka, so hope you can join us for that as well. There's two parts to it. The first part is a 10-day presence and retreat at the monastery, Jetavana Monastery in Sri Lanka. And then after that, we're going to go and visit some of the holy sites around Sri Lanka, which is going to be a lot of fun. So all the information is on our website. If you would like to stay in contact with us, we do have a newsletter that is sent every week, as well as also the most active is our WhatsApp group. So you can join our WhatsApp group as well. And also our Facebook page, Instagram page, and our website also has information, so you can follow us there as well. And yeah, that's probably
there is just one more thing here. This is not related to Metta Center, but I made the announcement last week as well about a project, not a project, a study that is being conducted by Ajahn Sadaro or Kevin Berryman. And if anyone who has been meditating for the past 3 years, if you consider yourself to be an experienced meditator, you might like to participate in this study. So Monash University is conducting this study about the influence of a meditation practice on interpersonal relationships. It's going to be held soon in mid-June. You will need to be physically in Sydney to participate in this. And I think it involves some kind of interesting games on the screen, a computer screen. And anyway, it's going to be interesting. So if anyone is interested, please participate. I've checked with Ajahn Sadaro. Experienced meditators, what it means by that, it doesn't really mean you just have to be meditating all the time. It just means that you are familiar with meditation and at least you've been practicing for about 3 years, perhaps, having attended retreats, but that's not necessary either. So this is all the information. And that'd be great if you could participate and let Ajahn Sadaro know. So when you read the information there, Ajahn Sadaro is also called Kevin. So Kevin Berryman is the same person as Ajahn Sadaro, who will also be giving a talk on the 12th of June in person next month. And that's it. And Sister Paññasiri, this is just my personal request. Maybe if you happen to come to Australia, to Sydney one day, please do let us know. Maybe you can lead a session in person or conduct a workshop or something like that. We would like to welcome you back again if you happen to be in Australia.
Given that I have roots in Australia, that might be possible, but we'll see what happens and I'll keep you posted. And if you are coming to Sri Lanka, Sister Tina, let me know, then we can organize something as well.
That'll be amazing. Yay. Thank you so much, sister. It was wonderful connecting with you today.
Thank
Likewise.
you.
Wish all of you well.
Bye-bye. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.